goes on from there. Anyway, there is some other news that has gone on today. Peter Strzok, the Peter Strzok, has now testified behind closed doors earlier today, and Freedom Caucus members, Andy Biggs of Arizona, Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida, here to talk about this and so much more. And apparently, I'm hearing reports, Matt Gaetz, you were in the room, that in fact Peter Strzok actually was never questioned by Robert Mueller, even though Robert Mueller knew about all these text messages that the anti-Trump bias that this man had.
Well, Sean, we can't get into the specifics of the questions or the answers. We can share our reactions. What I can say in response to your question is that I am shocked at the lack of curiosity with Robert Mueller. I mean, Sean, if you were in Mueller's shoes and you had found these text messages, I would think that you would want to ask whether or not they impacted the investigative decisions that were made, whether there was bias, whether there was contact with other members of the FBI regarding the investigation and where it was going and who was making the critical judgment calls. And I just cannot believe the lack of curiosity on the part of Robert Mueller. It was the strongest reaction I've had today from Peter Strzok's testimony.
Let me ask you this. If I was in the room, and you know how closely I'm following this case, and Peter Strzok is in the heart of all of this. He was writing the exoneration of Hillary long before they did the investigation, interviewed her. He was part of that interview, part of the interview with General Flynn. He immediately started the witch hunt against Donald Trump. We've seen all the text messages, insurance policies. Will stop him, loathsome human being, and it can go on from there. Can you give us a headline? What would my reaction, knowing how passionate I am about the corruption here, because this involved literally the saving somebody guilty of felonies, rigging an investigation, and then trying to tear down the other candidate and impact a presidential election? How do you think I would have reacted if I was in the room?
I don't think you would have been surprised, because the Inspector General's report says that when he spoke to Peter Strzok, Strzok reflected, personal feelings that he was sharing with his personal lover, but that those weren't impacting the decisions he was making in the investigation. Those were the assertions Peter Strzok gave to the Inspector General, and so none of his responses when confronted with those messages have really surprised us today. The thing that may be out of with what we saw in the Inspector General's report deals with how this investigation was started. Sean, you will know that we have been demanding documents from before the 31st of July to determine whether or not there was intelligence collected on the Trump campaign and whether or not people were paid to collect that intelligence. In those types of questions, we have not gotten clear answers from Peter Strzok, and if it were true that no intelligence collection occurred prior to opening up on Papadopoulos, then you would think Strzok would just clearly state that there was nothing going on. But the fact that he was obtuse in his responses, it really raises a lot of suspicion that intelligence may have in fact been going on.
I can ask you your impression. Did you feel he was telling the truth?
I felt like in some cases he was not being clear in his responses. I don't think that it is ever truthful to reflect on those text messages as anything other than a bias and a willingness to take official action based on that bias. So in that sense, no, I don't believe that Peter Strzok has been truthful to the Inspector General or to Congress today, because it's so obvious that this was someone who held bias and who was willing to take action based on that bias.
Do you agree with me in my characterization that this is the biggest abuse of power corruption scandal in American history, and that we had a number of high-ranking FBI officials and others that were involved in an effort to literally to frame Donald Trump, to attack him unfairly, create a phony narrative about Russia, while simultaneously and previously saving Hillary Clinton from what other Americans would have gotten, which is an indictment?
I think it is entirely correct that this represents an unprecedented abuse of power. But, Sean, that's not just your view. When my colleague Jim Jordan asked the Inspector General if he had ever seen anything like this, where essentially the entire leadership of the FBI has to be swept out at once because of firings, demotions, criminal prosecutions, conflicts of interest. They're leaving, days after they have to give testimony to Congress. because they don't want to have to account for that testimony. This is unprecedented. Those aren't your words and my words. Those are the words of Michael Horowitz, the Democrat Inspector General.
Let's talk about the immigration bill. Now, the Goodlatte bill, which had, I think, far more, was far better and far closer to the four principles that the president outlined, Congressman Gaetz. We didn't get enough votes. Why can't we get Republicans to, and it's simple, fund the wall, give the president all the money from the wall up front, because any money promised down the road is never coming. Number two, it would give the Democrats things they say that they want. You know, it would be a DACA fix, separation of families fix. The president, I know his executive order the other day, I don't think it's going to pass muster in any court, but putting that aside, it gives Congress time to do their job. This is Congress's law. This is a past president that put this into law. It's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump's the only one that stood up and fixed it.
Well, Sean, there are two key questions that are dividing the Republican Party right now on immigration. The first is whether anyone who came here illegally should have a path to citizenship. You know, it's my view, and it's the view of the Goodlatte and the president, that there is a way to be compassionate with legal status with people who've come here through no fault of their own. But when you give people citizenship, first generation illegal entry into the country, you build all the wrong incentives into the system, in my view. The second key question is whether or not the parents of the DACA kids ought to be given some opportunity to live here legally and obtain citizenship. A lot of us think that the problem that you have with children that we all want to be compassionate for is that their parents are choosing to illegally enter our country against the wishes of our country and against the dignity of our very border. And so the conservatives believe that we can be compassionate to children, but that we cannot reward the illegal alien parents with citizenship, and we cannot create broad new pathways to citizenship. And I hope that we can make the conservative case on those points so that we can persuade our colleagues.